Brielle Whitcomb did not cry when they dragged her across the frost-covered courtyard in chains, and that frightened the Silverpine pack more than tears ever could. The dawn had barely broken over the mountains, leaving the world pale and breathless, but nearly every wolf in the territory had gathered beneath the old Judgment Arch to watch the weakest Omega among them be condemned. Moonstone cuffs circled Brielle's wrists and ankles, their crystal edges glowing faintly blue against her white skin, each step pulling a soft metallic sound from the chain between her feet. She kept her chin lowered, not in surrender, but because Nora Whitcomb, her grandmother, had once told her that dignity did not need an audience to remain alive. "Look at her," someone whispered from the crowd. "She still pretends she is innocent." Brielle's fingers tightened around nothing. The one thing she should have been holding, the white wolf pendant her mother had left her, was gone. Stolen first, then used as proof against her. At the foot of the arch stood Brenna Greer, wrapped in a pale blue cloak trimmed with silver fox fur, her golden hair arranged as if this were a royal feast instead of a public shaming. Beside her, High Elder Marlowe Greer watched with the solemn face of a man performing duty, though his eyes held no grief. "Brielle Whitcomb," Marlowe called, his voice carrying cleanly across the courtyard. "You are accused of stealing a sacred relic, entering the crystal cave without permission, and defiling ground protected since the founding of Silverpine." A murmur rolled through the pack. Brielle lifted her eyes then, soft gray-blue and painfully steady. "I did not steal it," she said. Her voice was quiet, but not broken. Brenna gave a sharp little laugh. "Then why was your scent found near the cave door?" Brielle looked at her, remembering the night before. Brenna's hand on her arm, her sweet voice asking for help, the smell of pine smoke in the corridor, the sudden darkness over Brielle's head before she woke with guards around her. "Because someone took me there," Brielle said. "Because someone wanted me blamed." The courtyard went still for half a heartbeat. Then Brenna's face crumpled into outrage so practiced it almost looked real. "She is lying. She has always envied what she could never become." Those words landed harder than the chains. Brielle had heard versions of them all her life. Too gentle to be useful, too quiet to be chosen, too Omega to matter. She had cleaned floors in the pack house, mended children's coats, soothed fevers with cool cloths and patient hands, and somehow kindness had only made her easier to dismiss. At the edge of the crowd, Nora pushed forward, silver hair loose around her weathered face. "Marlowe, do not do this. You knew her mother. You know that pendant belongs to Brielle by blood." A guard stepped in front of the old woman. Brielle flinched for the first time. "Grandmother, please." Nora's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "Hold on to the truth, child, even if no one else will." Marlowe's jaw tightened. For a moment, something cold and ugly passed across his face, gone before the crowd could name it. "The council has decided," he said. "Until the Alpha King's inspection is complete, the accused will be sealed inside the crystal cave. Let the ancient stones judge what the pack cannot." A ripple of fear moved through the wolves. No one spoke lightly of the cave beneath Silverpine Mountain, where crystal walls caught moonlight even at noon, and old punishments were said to echo long after the guilty stopped breathing. Brielle felt the world narrow to the chain at her ankles, the ice beneath her bare feet, and Nora's trembling hand reaching for her from too far away. The guards pulled her toward the mountain path. Behind her, Brenna whispered just loudly enough for Brielle to hear, "By nightfall, no one will remember your name." Brielle did not answer. She looked once toward the distant black line of the Royal Road, where rumors said Alpha King Darien Crossvale was expected before the next moonrise. She did not hope for rescue. Hope was too dangerous for girls in chains. But as the cave mouth opened before her, glittering like a beautiful wound in the mountain, Brielle drew one careful breath and carried the truth inside with her. The first thing Brielle noticed inside the crystal cave was not the cold, but the silence. It did not feel empty. It felt watchful. The guards shoved her past the narrow entrance and into a chamber where hundreds of crystal points rose from the floor like frozen flames, catching the thin morning light and breaking it into pale blue shards across the walls. The beauty of it stole her breath for one fragile second. Then the moonstone chain tightened, and pain moved through her wrists like ice water. "Kneel there," one guard ordered, pointing to a flat stone circle at the center of the cave. Brielle obeyed because fighting would only give them another lie to tell about her. The chain between her ankles scraped over the crystal floor as she lowered herself, her thin dress offering no warmth against the stone. Behind her, Marlowe Greer stepped inside but remained near the entrance, as if even he did not trust the cave fully. Brenna stayed outside, a pale shape beyond the opening, watching with bright, satisfied eyes. "The seal will hold until the inspection is finished," Marlowe said to the guards. "No food until sunset. Water only if she confesses." Brielle lifted her head. "There is nothing to confess." For the first time, Marlowe looked at her not like an elder, but like a man cornered by something he feared. "Then pray the cave believes you." He raised his hand, and the crystals around the entrance flared with white light. The stone door slid down with a deep, grinding sound, cutting away the courtyard, the voices, the sky, and Nora's face. Darkness folded in. Brielle sat very still until her breathing stopped shaking. She had been afraid before. Afraid when her mother died and left only the pendant behind. Afraid when the pack learned her wolf was soft and slow to rise. Afraid when kindness became something people used without ever valuing. But this was different. This was fear with walls. A thin line of light pulsed through the moonstone chain, and the cuffs drank warmth from her skin. Her fingers went numb first, then her shoulders, then the quiet place inside her where her omega nature, usually hummed with instinct and empathy, seemed to dim. She pressed her palms against the stone beneath her and felt a faint vibration, almost like a heartbeat buried far below the mountain. "I did not betray you," she whispered, though she did not know whether she was speaking to the cave, her mother, or herself. The crystals answered with a soft flicker. Not enough to free her. Not enough to comfort her. Only enough to make her wonder. Hours passed without shape. The cave gave her no sun to measure time. Only the slow ache of cold and the steady pull of the chain. Once, she thought she heard Nora calling her name, but it was only water dripping somewhere deep in the dark. Brielle leaned against a crystal column and closed her eyes, trying to remember the weight of the white wolf pendant against her chest. Her mother had told her it was not jewelry. It was a promise. Brielle had been too young then to ask what kind of promise could survive death, shame, and theft. Now she wished she had. A sudden scrape sounded near the rear of the chamber. Brielle opened her eyes. Something small moved between the crystal shadows, limping, its breath coming in frightened little bursts. A wolf pup, no older than a few months, stumbled into the blue light with one paw tucked close to its body. Its fur was smoke gray, its ears too large for its head, and its amber eyes fixed on Brielle with desperate trust. "Oh, sweetheart," she breathed. The chain cut into her wrists as she reached as far as she could. "Come here. I will not hurt you." The pup hesitated, then crawled toward her, trembling from cold. Brielle gathered it carefully against her lap, using her own body to shield it from the cave floor. The cuff burned brighter, punishing the small act as if compassion itself were a crime. Brielle swallowed the pain and tucked the pup beneath her arm. "It is all right," she whispered, though nothing was. Outside the sealed door, footsteps approached and stopped. She heard Brenna's voice, low and pleased. "Still quiet in there?" A guard muttered something Brielle could not catch. Brenna laughed softly. "Good. By the time the Alpha King arrives, she will look guilty enough for everyone." Brielle went colder than the cave. The pup whimpered against her chest. She held it closer, staring at the sealed crystal door as the truth sharpened inside her. They were not waiting for judgment. They were preparing a performance. By the time the royal horns echoed through the lower valley, Silverpine had carefully hidden every trace of what it had done. The frost where Brielle Whitcomb had stumbled in chains had been swept smooth. Fresh, evergreen garlands hung beneath the judgment arch. Even the guards who had marched her toward the mountain now stood with polished armor and empty expressions, hoping discipline could erase memory. High Elder Marlowe Greer waited at the pack gates in formal gray robes, his silver clasp gleaming against his chest, while Brenna stood beside him in a pale blue cloak, her posture graceful, her smile measured. They had rehearsed this morning in their minds. They believed they had prepared for the Alpha King. They had not prepared for a man who trusted silence more than speeches. Alpha King Darian Crossvale entered Silverpine on a black stallion that climbed the mountain trail without hesitation. He was broad-shouldered beneath a dark wool coat trimmed with wolf fur, his black hair stirred by the cold wind, his silver eyes calm enough to unsettle every wolf who met them. Caleb Rourke rode just behind him, saying nothing, already studying the faces waiting at the gate. Darian dismounted without ceremony. His gaze traveled over the courtyard once, slowly, noticing details that others overlooked. The frost had been disturbed and freshly brushed away in uneven circles. One of the guards kept rubbing his right wrist as though remembering the weight of a chain. Several servants stared toward the mountain before catching themselves. Fear rarely looked people in the eye. It looked away. "Your Majesty," Marlowe said with a respectful bow. "Silverpine welcomes you." Darian acknowledged the greeting with a slight nod, but his attention lingered on the empty space beneath the judgment arch. "You requested a royal inspection concerning a sacred relic," he said evenly. "I expected to find a dispute. Instead, I find a courtyard that has been cleaned too carefully." Marlowe offered a patient smile. "We wish to receive our king with proper dignity." Darian glanced down once more at the stone. Dignity leaves different footprints than panic. Caleb noticed the elder's fingers tighten almost imperceptibly before relaxing again. Brenna stepped forward with practiced composure. "The matter has already been contained, Your Majesty." A troubled Omega confessed through her actions, even if not with her words. Darian turned his eyes to her for the first time. Through her actions? Brenna hesitated only a heartbeat. She entered forbidden ground. Alone. Brenna opened her mouth, then closed it. Marlowe answered instead. "That is what the evidence suggests." Caleb quietly circled the courtyard while the conversation continued. Near the edge of the arch, he knelt beside a narrow crack in the stone. Wedged inside was a tiny strand of pale brown hair caught beneath a crystal fragment no broom had reached. He looked toward Darian, but said nothing yet. The king was already finding his own answers. Darian's gaze settled on a weathered wooden bench standing beneath the eaves of the pack house. A half-finished basket of mending rested there beside a folded child's cloak with one sleeve neatly repaired. "Whose work is that?" he asked unexpectedly. Marlowe looked confused. "I beg your pardon." Darian pointed toward the basket. "Someone was repairing children's clothing this morning and never returned to finish." One elderly servant lowered her eyes. Another quietly wiped away a tear. Brenna answered too quickly. "It belonged to the Omega." Darian noticed the reply came before anyone had asked which Omega. He walked to the bench and gently lifted the small cloak. The stitches were careful, nearly invisible, the kind made by someone who expected the child wearing it to fall and play without ever noticing the repair. He laid it back exactly as he had found it. "Interesting," he murmured. Someone accused of stealing a sacred relic still found time to mend another family's child before dawn. No one answered. The silence grew heavier. At last Darian faced Marlowe again. "Where is Brielle Whitcomb?" Marlowe drew a slow breath. "She is being held safely until your judgment." "Where?" This time the question carried unmistakable authority. Marlowe inclined his head toward the mountain. "Inside the crystal cave." Several wolves nearby visibly flinched. Darian saw every one of them. He saw the guard who looked sick, the servant who silently crossed herself, the child hiding behind his mother's skirts. None of them reacted like wolves who believed justice had been served. They reacted like witnesses hoping someone else would finally speak. Before Darian could answer, a frail voice rose from the back of the gathering. "She is innocent." Nora Whitcomb stepped through the crowd with trembling determination, her silver hair loosened by the wind, clutching a strip of white cloth faintly stained with blue moonstone dust. "Your Majesty," she said, stopping only a few feet away. "My granddaughter has spent her whole life mending what other people broke. She has never stolen anything except suffering from those who needed comfort." Darian accepted the cloth from her hands and studied the blue dust embedded in its torn edge. Then he lifted his eyes toward the mountain. Far above them, hidden beneath stone and crystal, something pulsed once beneath the earth. It was not loud. It was not even a sound. It felt like a heartbeat struggling to be heard. Darian closed his fingers around the cloth. Every careful explanation he had heard that morning suddenly weighed less than one frightened pulse beneath the mountain. "Caleb," he said quietly, already turning toward the trail leading to the crystal cave, "we are done listening. Now we start looking." The mountain path rose steeply behind Silverpine, narrowing between black pines and shelves of ice-glazed stone. Darian walked at the front, not because he needed guidance, but because every instinct in him had turned toward the cave with the certainty of a compass finding north. Marlowe followed 3 steps behind, speaking in a careful stream of explanations that sounded more polished than true. The Crystal Cave has always answered to old law, Your Majesty. Even Alpha Kings before you respected its judgment. Darien did not slow. Old law does not excuse cruelty. Caleb moved beside Nora, offering his arm without making her feel weak. The old woman accepted only when the path grew slick, her eyes fixed ahead as if she could pull Brielle out by love alone. Behind them, Brenna walked with the pack witnesses, silent now, one hand tucked inside her torn cloak. Caleb glanced back once. She looked away too late. At the cave entrance, the seal glowed across the stone door in veins of cold white light. The air smelled of snow, metal, and something faintly sweet, like crushed flowers left too long in a locked room. Darien placed his palm against the crystal surface. Power pushed back. Not enough to stop him. Enough to warn him. Deep inside the mountain, the pulse came again, stronger this time, and with it came a sound no one else seemed to hear. A small, frightened whimper followed by a woman's whisper. Gentle. Exhausted. Still comforting someone smaller than herself. Darien's hand tightened. She is not alone in there. Marlowe's face changed before he could hide it. Impossible. The cave was cleared. Was it? Caleb asked. He crouched near the base of the sealed door, where a smear of gray fur clung to a crystal edge. Wolf pup. Young. A murmur broke through the gathered witnesses. Nora pressed her hand to her mouth. Brielle would protect it, she whispered. Even now, she would. Darien turned to Marlowe. Open it. The elder spread his hands. As I told you, the seal cannot be broken until moonrise without the pendant. The cave recognizes only the White Wolf bloodline and the council key. Then bring the key. Marlowe's silence lasted half a second too long. Brenna stepped forward, voice thin. Father, perhaps we should wait. If the cave is testing her, interfering could make it worse. Darien looked at her, and whatever excuse she had prepared faded under the weight of his stare. You are very eager for an innocent woman to remain unseen. Color rose high in Brenna's cheeks. She is not innocent. Nora's voice shook, but it carried. Then say it while touching the elder stone. Everyone turned. Beside the entrance stood a waist-high crystal column, almost hidden under frost. Its surface was flat at the top, worn smooth by generations of hands. Nora straightened, grief giving her a kind of fierce dignity. My daughter told me about this place. The elder stone does not judge guilt. It remembers oaths. Let Brenna repeat her accusation there. Marlowe's expression hardened. Old women's stories have no place in royal proceedings. Then you should not fear one, Caleb said. The first real shift in the crowd happened there. Not rebellion. Not yet. But doubt, fragile and bright, passed from face to face. Darien stepped aside, leaving a clear path to the stone. Brenna Greer, he said. Place your hand on it, and tell your king that Brielle Whitcomb stole the pendant. Brenna did not move. The silence grew teeth. Her father leaned close, whispering something only she could hear, but the panic in her eyes had already betrayed more than words. At last she walked to the stone and set her trembling palm on its surface. Brielle Whitcomb stole the White Wolf pendant, she said. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the crystal beneath her hand flashed red. Brenna cried out and stumbled back, not injured, but exposed. A gasp tore through the witnesses. The cave door answered with a deep crack from within, and the white seal flickered as if some hidden truth had struck it from the other side. Darien's gaze moved from Brenna to Marlowe, and now there was no courtly patience left in him. You sealed her with a lie. Marlowe lifted his chin, choosing power over shame. I protected this pack from a bloodline that should have ended. Nora went utterly still. Darien heard the words beneath the words. Bloodline. Pendant. Cave. Brielle was not merely accused. She was being erased. Before he could speak, the mountain trembled. From behind the sealed door came the pup's terrified cry, then Brielle's faint voice, barely more than breath. Please hold on. Darien stepped toward the crystal door, silver eyes burning. Caleb, secure the Greers. Marlowe snarled. You have no proof strong enough to touch an elder. Darien placed both hands against the seal. I have her voice. The cave flared white, and beneath the stone, something began to break. Inside the crystal cave, Brielle felt the mountain shudder before she heard it. The pulse beneath the stone circle surged through her knees, up her spine, and into the moonstone chain until every cuff around her wrists and ankles burned with pale fire. The wolf pup jerked in her arms, too weak to cry loudly now, its small body trembling beneath the cover of her thin sleeve. "No, no, stay with me," Brielle whispered, bending over it as if her own breath could shield it from the cold. The cave had grown brighter, but not kinder. Light poured through the crystal walls in uneven flashes, revealing long cracks spreading across the chamber like lightning trapped beneath glass. Somewhere beyond the sealed door, voices rose, distant and distorted. She thought she heard Nora. Then a deeper voice followed, calm enough to be terrifying, and Brielle's heart stumbled though she did not know why. The chain snapped tight, pulling her wrists away from the pup as if the cave itself wanted to test which pain she would choose. Brielle bit back a gasp and leaned forward until the cuffs cut into old bruises. "I will not let go," she said, not to the chain, not even to the cave, but to whatever cruel order had decided the smallest lives were easiest to sacrifice. The pup's amber eyes opened, glassy with fear. Its injured paw twitched against her palm. Brielle remembered every hand that had pushed her aside, every table where she had served food she was not invited to share, every gentle thing in her that others had called weakness. Maybe they had been wrong. Maybe gentleness was not the absence of strength. Maybe it was strength refusing to become cruel. She pressed the pup against her chest and let the last warmth in her body flow where it was needed most. A soft glow answered beneath her skin, faint gold against the blue of the moonstone. Brielle stared, stunned. The cuffs reacted instantly. The chain pulled harder, punishing the light, dragging a cry from her throat before she could swallow it. Outside the cave, Darian heard that cry clearly. Something inside him went still in a way more dangerous than rage. His palms remained braced against the seal, ancient magic crawling over his skin like frost. Caleb had already moved behind Marlowe and Brenna, royal guards closing around the Greers as the witnesses backed away in fear. "Your Majesty," Caleb warned, "if you force the seal, the backlash could travel through the chain." Darian did not look away from the crystal door. "And if I wait?" Nora answered, her voice breaking. "My girl dies slowly so liars can feel safe." Marlowe laughed once, sharp and desperate. "You know nothing about what she carries. That bloodline was forbidden for a reason. The cave was never meant to answer to an Omega." The words struck the air like a confession wrapped in hatred. Darian turned at last, silver eyes fixed on him. "Then why does it answer to her now?" Marlowe had no reply. From within the mountain came another flash of gold, visible this time through the crystal veins around the door. The witnesses saw it. Brenna saw it. Nora fell to her knees, not from weakness, but recognition. "Her mother's light," she whispered. Inside, Brielle felt the pup's breathing steady for one fragile second. Hope rose so suddenly it hurt. Then the cave changed. The stone circle beneath her opened in a ring of white light, and the moonstone chain drove its anchors deeper, fastening itself not only to the floor, but to her pulse. Brielle understood without being told. The cave had accepted her power, and the chain was trying to drain it. If she stopped, the pup would fade. If she continued, she might not have enough left to survive. She closed her eyes and made the choice. "Take mine," she whispered. "Let it live." The gold light flared. Outside, the seal split from top to bottom with a sound like winter breaking. Darian felt the decision she had made as if it had crossed his own chest. Not words, not a bond fully formed. A truth. This Omega, chained and abandoned, had chosen mercy when no one had shown it to her. Whatever law had brought him to Silverpine no longer mattered. Whatever politics Marlowe hid behind had ended. Darian stepped back, bloodless cold burning across his hands, and spoke with the quiet finality of a king crossing a line he would never uncross. "If this cave wants judgment, it will have mine." Then he struck the seal. The seal did not open like a door. It burst inward in a storm of white light, crystal dust, and ancient cold, forcing the witnesses outside to shield their faces as the mountain exhaled around them. Darian stepped through first, his coat snapping behind him, his burned hands still lifted as if he could hold the cave itself back by will alone. The chamber beyond glimmered with fractured blue fire, beautiful in the way frozen things could be beautiful before they killed. At its center, Brielle Whitcomb knelt on the stone circle, her pale brown hair loose around her face, her gray-blue eyes half open, her thin arms wrapped around the injured wolf pup as though she had forgotten the meaning of self-preservation. The moonstone chain stretched from her wrists and ankles into the floor, no longer simply holding her in place, but pulsing with every beat of her heart. Darian stopped. For one breath, all the power in him went silent. He had seen battlefields. He had seen ambition dressed as duty and cruelty dressed as law. But he had never seen innocence punished so quietly, nor mercy look so close to collapse. Brielle blinked at him, confused by the shape of him in the light. "Please," she whispered, her voice rough from cold. "The pup first." Nora cried out behind him, but Caleb held her gently at the entrance, not restraining her from love, only from the unstable crystal spreading beneath their feet. Darian crossed the chamber slowly, each step making the chain glow brighter in warning. The pup whimpered, alive but weak, its smoke gray fur streaked with gold from the light Brielle had given it. Darian crouched before her, keeping his voice low. "You saved it." Brielle swallowed, trying to focus. It was afraid. That answer struck him harder than any plea could have. Not because it was brave, though it was. Because it was simple. In a world that had counted rank before life, she had seen fear and answered it with warmth. Darian reached toward the pup, but the chain snapped upward like a living thing, wrapping tighter around Brielle's wrist. She gasped, and the crystals overhead flared red. "Do not touch it," Marlowe shouted from the broken doorway, his composure cracking at last. "The chain has bonded to her blood. If he interferes, the cave may take them both." Darian did not turn. "You knew this would happen." Marlowe's silence confirmed more than denial ever could. Caleb seized him fully then, and Brenna stumbled backward as the witnesses murmured in horror. Nora's voice trembled with years of buried truth. "Her mother warned me. The Wickham women were not thieves. They were keepers. The pendant did not give them power. It proved the cave already knew them." Brielle's eyes shifted toward her grandmother. "Keeper." The word barely escaped her. Nora stepped as far into the chamber as Caleb allowed, tears shining on her lined face. "Your mother protected this mountain. She hid the truth so you could live an ordinary life." Marlowe laughed bitterly. "And failed. The cave chose an Omega. Do you understand what that would have done to Silverpine? Elders bowing to a servant girl? Bloodlines losing their claim." Darian finally looked back at him, and the quiet in his face was more frightening than fury. "So you stole her pendant." Brenna's breath caught. Marlowe's jaw tightened. "I preserved order." "No," Darian said. "You preserved your throne inside this pack." The cave answered with a low hum, as if the walls themselves had heard the difference. Around Brielle's throat, beneath the torn collar of her dress, a faint silver mark began to glow where the pendant had once rested. Not the pendant itself, its memory. Darian saw it and understood the next truth before anyone spoke it. The White Wolf bloodline had not ended with Brielle's mother. It was kneeling in chains before him, still trying to save a life smaller than her own. Brielle's strength wavered. The gold light in her hands flickered, and the pup's breathing faltered with it. Darian moved closer despite the chain's warning flare. "Brielle," he said, using her name like a promise, "look at me." She did. Something passed between them then, not full recognition, not yet, but a pull deep enough to make the cave tremble. "I am going to break what they put on you." Her lips parted in fear, not for herself. "It will hurt you." Darian's silver eyes softened for the first time. "Then let it." The moonstone chain rose from the floor, bright and vicious, as if accepting his challenge. Darian stepped into the circle of crystal light and wrapped both hands around the first length of moonstone chain. The instant his fingers closed over the frozen links, the cave roared awake. White light burst through every crystal vein in the walls, racing upward like lightning trapped beneath glass. The chain fought him with ancient magic, tightening around Brielle's wrists until she gasped and nearly dropped the wolf pup she still cradled against her heart. "Stop," she pleaded, panic breaking through her exhaustion for the first time. "It is feeding on me. If you pull, it will only take more." Darian looked at the raw marks circling her wrists, then at the frightened pup tucked safely beneath her arm. Even now, she was shielding another life before thinking of her own. Something settled inside him with absolute certainty. Everything he had suspected about her was true. "Then it has taken enough?" he said quietly. He pulled. The first anchor exploded from the stone floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the chamber. Brielle cried out as warmth rushed back into her arm, and the golden light beneath her skin flickered brighter instead of fading. The wolf pup stirred immediately, lifting its small head as fresh strength returned to its tiny body. Outside the shattered entrance, the gathered wolves instinctively stepped backward. None of them had ever seen an alpha king challenge the judgment of the crystal cave itself. Marlowe struggled against Caleb's grip, his voice no longer calm but desperate. Do not let him finish. If every chain breaks, the cave will reveal the true keeper before the entire pack. Darian did not even look toward him. That is exactly what should happen. The second chain lashed upward like a living serpent, wrapping around his forearm. Frost spread instantly across his sleeve, burning through leather and skin, but he refused to release his grip. Brielle saw the pain cross his face. Please, she whispered. You do not have to suffer for me. At last Darian met her eyes fully. There was no pity in his expression, only respect. No, he answered. I am suffering because someone convinced an entire pack that your kindness deserved punishment. The words struck Brielle harder than the chain ever had. No one had ever spoken about her pain as though it mattered. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to look away. Across the chamber, Brenna's trembling finally overcame her pride. The pendant, Brielle said suddenly, memory breaking through the haze. She hid it inside her cloak after they dragged me away. Every eye turned toward Brenna. Her hand flew instinctively to the torn lining of her pale blue cloak before she realized what she had done. Caleb moved first, but he did not need to touch her. A broken silver chain slipped from the damaged seam and struck the crystal floor with a clear, ringing note. The white wolf pendant slid across the stone, glowing brighter with every inch until it stopped at Brielle's knees. No one breathed. Slowly, as though answering a promise made years before, the pendant lifted into the air by itself. It floated between Brielle and Darian, then settled gently against Brielle's throat. The moment the silver touched her skin, every crystal inside the cave answered. The towering formations bent inward, not collapsing, but bowing. Their white light softened into warm gold. The mountain itself recognized her. Nora fell to her knees, tears shining openly now. Welcome home, she whispered. Marlowe's face drained of all color. Impossible. His voice cracked beneath the weight of his own lies. An Omega cannot inherit the Keeper's line. Before anyone could answer, the crystal walls shimmered like still water disturbed by wind. Images formed within them, clear enough for every witness to see. Brielle's mother stood in this very chamber years earlier, the white wolf pendant glowing against her chest as she faced a younger Marlowe. You cannot control what the cave chooses, she told him calmly. Its keeper is chosen by compassion, not rank. Marlowe reached for the pendant, but she stepped away, placing one hand over the sleeping infant in Nora's arms. If protecting my daughter means history forgets my name, then let it forget me. One day the cave will remember for us. The vision dissolved, leaving only silence and truth. No accusation remained. Every wolf had seen what happened with their own eyes. Brielle looked toward Marlowe, not with triumph, but with quiet sorrow. You did not fear my blood, she said softly. You feared losing the power to decide whose life mattered. Marlowe lowered his head for the first time. The final moonstone chains suddenly tightened together, pouring every remaining fragment of their magic into one last attempt to drag Brielle back to the stone circle. Darian stepped between her and the surging chains without hesitation. Not again. He wrapped both burned hands around the final links. Brielle reached for him with her newly freed hand, golden light flowing naturally into his injured skin. Their strength met in the center of the chain, hers gentle, his unyielding. Neither could have broken it alone. Together, they did. Every remaining link shattered at once, bursting into harmless silver fragments that scattered across the cave floor like frozen rain. The thunderous sound rolled through Silverpine Mountain, carrying far beyond the valley. When the light finally faded, Brielle was no longer kneeling. Darian had caught her before she could fall. The wolf pup slept peacefully against her shoulder. The white wolf pendant rested over her heart. Around them lay every broken chain that had once claimed ownership of her life, and not a single one remained unbroken. Darien carried Brielle out of the crystal cave as if the whole mountain had been built to return her to the light. No one in Silverpine spoke. The witnesses who had watched her dragged away hours earlier now stood with their heads lowered, their faces gray with shame as the broken moonstone chain clattered behind the king's boots. Brielle held the smoke-gray pup against her chest, still dazed, still cold, but alive enough to nuzzle weakly beneath her chin. The white wolf pendant rested at her throat, glowing softly now, no longer defending itself, only belonging. Nora reached her first. Darien lowered Brielle carefully onto a flat stone near the cave mouth, and the old woman gathered her granddaughter's face between both trembling hands. "I knew," Nora whispered. "I knew they could not make you what they said you were." Brielle tried to smile, but the small movement broke into tears. "I was so afraid you would think I had shamed her." Nora pressed her forehead to Brielle's. "Your mother would have crossed fire to reach you. Today, you became the reason the fire moved aside." Around them, the pack heard every word. Some wept quietly. Others could not meet Brielle's eyes. Darien stood, and the softness that had touched his face vanished beneath the weight of the crown. "Bring Marlowe Greer forward." Caleb forced the elder to his knees before the cave entrance, not roughly, but with a finality that made resistance useless. Brenna stood beside him under guard, her pale cloak torn open where the pendant had been hidden. "By royal law," Darien said. "The theft of a sacred blood relic, the false imprisonment of an Omega, and the use of ritual chains without lawful judgment are crimes against the crown." Marlowe lifted his chin, still clinging to pride like a ruined cloak. "I did what was necessary to protect this pack from being ruled by sentiment." Darien's voice stayed low. "You nearly let a young woman die because you feared losing power to kindness." The words moved through the crowd with more force than shouting. Brenna began to shake. "Father said it was only to frighten her," she said suddenly. "He said the cave would stay quiet if the pendant was kept away. I did not know the chain would bond to her." Marlowe turned on her with a look sharp enough to cut. Silence. But Brenna was already crying. Not prettily now, not for display. "I hated her because you taught me to. Every time someone praised her mother, every time Nora looked proud of her, you said their bloodline was a threat. I wanted her humbled. I did not want this." Brielle listened from Nora's arms, exhaustion and sorrow crossing her face in equal measure. Forgiveness did not come to her like a song. It came slowly, like breath after cold water, and it did not erase what had happened. "You still chose the lie," she said softly. Brenna bowed her head. "Yes." That single word mattered more than all her excuses. Darien gave Caleb one nod. "Marlowe Greer is removed from elder authority effective now. He will be taken to the royal seat for judgment. Brenna Greer will be held under guard until testimony is complete." The pack did not protest. Without Marlowe's fear holding them together, their silence changed from obedience to reckoning. One by one, wolves stepped forward and knelt, not to Darien, but to Brielle. The first was a guard who had locked the seal. "I should have questioned the order," he said. Another followed. Then another. Brielle's fingers tightened in the pup's fur. She did not look triumphant. She looked overwhelmed by the strange weight of being seen after years of being overlooked. Darien noticed and raised one hand. Stopping the line before apology became another burden placed on her shoulders. "Enough for tonight," he said. "She owes no one comfort for the pain they allowed." Brielle looked up at him then, and something unspoken passed between them, gentler than the bond that had trembled in the cave, but no less real. The pup stirred, pressing its small paw against the pendant, and the crystal doorway behind them answered with a warm white glow. Nora inhaled sharply. "The cave is not finished," she whispered. Brielle turned toward the mountain, no longer chained, yet suddenly aware that freedom was only the first truth waiting for her. The morning sun climbed slowly over Silverpine Mountain, washing the shattered crystals in warm gold instead of cold blue. For the first time in years, the entrance to the crystal cave stood open without fear. Brielle Whitcomb stepped across its threshold on her own feet, no chains pulling at her wrists, no guards walking behind her. She paused only once, looking down at the broken moonstone links scattered across the stone path. Hours earlier they had decided where she could stand, where she could breathe, and whether she deserved to live. Now they were nothing more than dull fragments catching the morning light. The smoke-gray wolf pup wriggled from her arms and bounded clumsily through the grass, stopping only to look back at her as though asking permission to keep exploring the world she had saved for him. Brielle smiled, the expression small but genuine, and Nora quietly reached for her hand. Your mother always believed freedom would look ordinary, the older woman whispered. Not because it was small, but because one day you would stop noticing the weight that had disappeared. Brielle squeezed her grandmother's hand, finally understanding those words. Freedom was not the moment the chains broke. Freedom was taking another step without wondering who might stop you. Behind them, the wolves of Silverpine had gathered once more in the same courtyard where Brielle had been condemned. This time there were no accusations waiting beneath the judgment arch. Darian Crossvale stood before the pack with Caleb at his side, while Marlowe Greer and Brenna Greer were escorted away under royal guard to face lawful judgment before the crown. No voices rose in protest. Their authority had ended the moment truth replaced fear. Darian turned toward the gathered wolves. Remember this day, he said, his calm voice carrying across the silent courtyard. Not because your king broke ancient chains, but because too many of you believed them before asking whether they should exist at all. Justice begins long before a ruler arrives. It begins when ordinary people refuse to look away. His words settled heavily over the pack. One after another, wolves who had remained silent during Brielle's suffering lowered their heads, not from obligation, but from genuine remorse. No one asked Brielle to erase what had happened. No one expected forgiveness to come before healing. That, perhaps, was the first honest thing Silverpine had learned in many years. The white wolf pendant rested quietly against Brielle's heart, no longer blazing with power because it no longer needed to prove whom it belonged to. The crystal cave had spoken. The mountain itself had remembered. Nothing remained to argue. Darian crossed the courtyard until only a few steps separated him from Brielle. There was no audience left to impress, no trial left to win. Only two people standing where fear had once ruled. He slowly lowered himself onto one knee before her, and a quiet gasp moved through the pack. The cave recognized you as its keeper, he said. The crown will honor that choice. But there is something the cave cannot decide. Brielle met his silver eyes. What is that? Whether trust should be given or earned. He held out his burned hand, the skin already healing where her golden light had touched it. I will never ask you to belong to me because I rescued you. I will never mistake gratitude for love. If one day you choose to walk beside me, I want it to be because you never again feel afraid while doing so. Tears filled Brielle's eyes, but they came gently now, carrying relief instead of despair. All her life, others had chosen for her. They had chosen her place, her worth, her future. Darian was offering her something no one else ever had: time. She placed her hand in his, not as a promise of forever, but as the beginning of something honest. Then let us begin there, she said softly. Darian rose beside her instead of leading her. Together, they walked through the center of the courtyard where she had once been dragged in chains. No one bowed because she demanded it. They bowed because they understood what they had nearly destroyed. As Brielle passed beneath the old judgment arch, a little wolf pup from the pack broke free from his mother's side and ran toward her. He shyly offered her a tiny white wildflower before hiding behind his mother's skirts again. Brielle accepted it with a smile that reached her eyes. In that simple gift, she saw the future more clearly than any ancient prophecy. Fear had taught one generation to build chains. Compassion had taught the next how to leave them broken. And as the morning breeze carried laughter across Silverpine for the first time in many seasons, Brielle walked forward beside the Alpha King, not as a prisoner who had been saved, but as a woman who had finally become free.